Are are we live? Yes, we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to something we have not had in a while. A very normal and average Saturday stream. How is everybody doing out there? And who is excited for a long-awaited return to story time with Dungeons and Dragons? It has been a while since our last time, so I'm definitely going to be taking a bit of a minute to do some recap once we get into it. But yeah, hello. Hey there, Marcial. How is everybody doing? Who all do we got out there? I've seen Terramon, Sourdough, Marcial in chat. How's your guys' weekends been? How's everybody doing? Anything exciting coming up? Any big plans for next week? I just recently, very sadly, had to cancel this Sunday's Dungeons and Dragons actual session with my campaign due to two people having scheduling conflicts that just couldn't really be shaped around very easily. So I'm actually going to have a bit of a day off tomorrow. Unfortunate to not be able to play D&D, though I cannot lie and say that I'm not just a little looking forward to having a very relaxing day with nothing scheduled and nothing that I need to do at all. Alright, Terramon, I would really like you to see my list. Would you rather at the end of the stream, or is any time good? If you have it now, you can go ahead and share it now. Right now, we just chatting, catching up with things. I have a question, not regarding D&D especially, but fantasy in general. What's the difference between wizard, sorcerer, spellcaster, and magician? So, in all technicality, just in broad fantasy, like looking over all fantasy collectively, there's not really a defined difference between any of these words. D&D has a very specific definition for almost all of those words, except for a magician, but there isn't really a set thing or a rule within fantasy. I would definitely say there are some subtextual or contextual differences that tend to be assumed with each of those words, though, but they wouldn't be hard rules that everyone follows. More so either something that tends to be agreed on, something that each of those words evokes compared to the others. Best example, wizards are almost always seen to be learned, wise in some fashion, people who possess powerful artifacts and stuff, people who have done stuff before, people based around education. Obviously, Harry Potter shows wizards at like young ages, but even there's kind of that element of this educational background that is rooted into wizardry in one sense or another. Another word that tends to have a really obvious subtext to it would be, say, a druid or a shaman, tends to evoke a very specific idea of drawing energy from nature, from totems, from something more primal, but kind of you get an idea of where that energy is being drawn from. Whereas wizard tends to evoke a more educational focus. Sorcerer tends to have a strong essence of a wild, powerful magic to it. Sorcerer is definitely applied to wizards through fantasy. Like I said, none of these rules are very hard set in kind of a broad sense. But when the word sorcerer is used, it tends to be referring to either very wild or very powerful magic. I guess I can't really off the top of my head think of a word, but sorcerer tends to have a larger level of mystique, power, and wildness to it when it comes to that. Spellcaster, I think, is a very general term. It's obviously just a term that's just taking two words and pushing them together, so it feels a bit more clinical in the way it's used a bit more like just describing the thing you're looking at. That is a spellcaster. And finally, magician is a word that tends to hold a bit more of a fanciful element to it. I think partly due to like the real world kind of using magician to describe people who do magic tricks tends to cause that to also be interpreted a little more like minor or illusion focused when it is used as a term in fantasy. Magician tends to hint more so where sorcerer is wild and powerful. Magician tends to be very trick, entertainment, illusion focused, and tends to be where that sort of... Eric, are you saying magic isn't real? I would never say such a thing. No. But that tends to be kind of the subtext of magician. Again, I can just off the top of my head think of a few examples of where these words are more used interchangeably in one fantasy story or another, where some are used to define very specific groups, but in a broader sense, there isn't a strong rule for any of these, but each of them has kind of an assumed level of subtext to them. Alright, you said you sent me something on Discord. Alright, Terramon. So this is a list of things you want in an artwork, Terramon? Can you give me a bit of a definition for what this list is exactly? I see. That really helps a lot and solves a problem I had. Thanks a lot. Hell yeah, Marcio. Glad I could help. And most important thing is, obviously, if you're building something, a world, a fantasy, or something like that, and you want to use these terms to mean something more specific or less specific, that is also really good. But definitely try to feel out what the subtext is, just because there are assumptions with each of those words. And if in your world, like, a wizard is a term for, say, people who can use magic that were trained through the government, a sorcerer is a term for somebody that was trained themselves, that isn't officially trained, is just somebody that has like done it outside of an official capacity. You're going to want to use it that way, because using it in reverse, calling the trained by the government people sorcerers and those out in the wild as wizards, doesn't like it could still work with enough explanation to the reader, but just runs slightly counter to the expected subtextual thoughts behind those words. Alright, Terramon. I was challenged to make a cursed thing for Marcial to draw. The condition was a bet. I made the cursed thing I could think of at the time. And the cursed thing you came up with, Terramon, is... Let's hear. Juniper is a Fuda. Juniper fists Eric with all 4 arms. Juniper is wearing BDSM gear. Juniper is looking at Milk with a devilish grin. Milk looking into the room, shocked at what he sees. Eric cheating on him with Fuda Juniper. Milk is holding a bouquet of flowers and Eric's favorite ice cream. This isn't an artwork. This is a story. Marcial, Terramon, what am I reading? And how are you going to get so much of this across? And yeah, Vulcan, I'm sorry. Terramon is having me read off his fucking... What is this? Is this a lemon? Terramon, did you write a lemon of me, Juniper, and Milkblade? Milk is wearing a wedding ring. Okay. I'm sorry. No. If I'm gonna do this, I need to get the right voice for this. Let me bring you all in just a little closer. The Tardibus is pregnant. Tardibus is tied down to a bed. Tardibus has a pained and or shocked look on his face. The Tardibus feels shame and yet excitement. Baby Moth is in the corner watching intently. Baby Moth is wearing a school uniform and backpack. There is a clock. The time is 5:15 p.m. The calendar indicates it is the 17th of December, 2021. There is a Christmas tree with wrapped presents under it. A picture of Milk and pregnant Eric and a happy family photo at the front of the home. A picture of Milk and Eric getting married. Milk wearing a sharp suit. Eric is in a dress. There's a big banner with the words, "Fuck you, Milk," hanging across the ceiling. There are several sex toys of all shapes and sizes scattered across the bed. Mood lighting. End scene. Thank you all. That was me reading Terramon's weird fetish lemon of Juniper, Eric, and Milkblade. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you. That is a lot of cursed stuff. I agree, V. I agree. Very cursed. I could never get married after hearing that. I know. It makes you feel dirty, doesn't it? Makes you feel just... Food of Junie sounds kind of hot, though. Not gonna lie. Sourdough. Sourdough. Some control, please. This isn't the contest I follow. This isn't the content I follow for. But it's the content I stay for. Damn, Vulcan. I'm very proud of my work. Okay, Terramon. Okay. Gosh. Alright. Oh, man. I'm gonna have to fucking palate cleanse after that if I'm getting back into a normal story time. Everybody who isn't Terramon, how has your guys' weeks been? How are you all doing? Excited to get in to another D&D story time? Excited for the weekend? Excited for whatever comes next? Any other news out there? Or any other questions people have? Terramon? Whose kid is Eric pregnant? That's not a question I had. I didn't have that question, Terramon. Done the dissection and now waiting eternally. Marcial, you should not... You should never offer art for Terramon. It will always be cursed. You had to know that before you agreed. What was this bet you two were engaged in? Now, let's just put on a little fireplace first. Well, seems everyone else here is a bit more on the relaxed side. Are we all excited for another story time? It has been a while since we've done one. I wonder what all you all remember from last session. Where the party was, what they were doing, and why. And what exactly we ended on. Nope, didn't even read past the first set of lines. Yeah, I'd imagine not. I would imagine not. Terramon, can I ask you just one specific question? Just one. Why, what instinct, what thought process led to you casting Milk as the cuck in that scenario? I'm just really curious. Due to some inside jokes I am aware of that I don't think you are, Terramon, why why did you cast Milk as a cuck in your artwork? I'm just stuck here baffled, curious even how that happened. God, I'm gonna have to post this to my archive, I just realized. Lord, I don't know. Should I just clip out this old section before I put it on YouTube? I don't know if people on YouTube coming to check out D&D stories want to hear this stuff. Well, the process started with the fisting, and Milk was a genius edition. Oh, damn, Milk told you guys the trash can story. Oh, Lord. Oh, man, I'm so sorry, Milk. All right, well, that actually explains a little bit for me then. Thank you, Marcio. Oh god, this is gonna be such a weird mood to get into the D&D story with now. Oh, you guys have set off my whole rhythm for today. Oh lord. All right, I gotta stand up and stretch. All right, hands up. Oh, lean forward. Okay. All right. That didn't do a lot to help, but I'd say pieces of it. Still don't know why you weren't wearing any pants. Oh, I was drunk. What do you mean? What, you never taken your pants off because you were drunk? It's like a common thought for me when I'm like fucking hammered. Like seriously, you get a 4 full loco and an Angry Orchard in. Your pants aren't off, sir. I think you're drinking wrong. Oh no, this is Lord. I should have just done a normal story time. Just hey, you gotta ask me questions. We'll do an Eric story time instead of this D&D shit. No, it's been way too long, but all right. All right, y'all. Let's try to settle in to our little fireplace. Allow the glow and the crackle to entrance us, if only for a moment, if only to pull us in to the world of the fire, the flames, the crackling heat that comes from each log, the dancing lights. They move about in a strange way, chasing the trails of oxygen as they are pulled into the bed of coals, fueling the fire, keeping it alit, keeping it alive. While the wood is thought of as the fuel, and it is what lends the energy to the flames, it is not what the fire truly needs to breathe. Take the logs away, and the coals will remain for some time. And should the coals even go dark, the heat of the fireplace would still hold for some time. What truly fuels it is the air that it pulls in, the oxygen that it needs to continually consume all in its path. Deprive it of its breath, of its core, of the thing that allows it to burn its fuel. And it will become nothing but smoke and ash. As we stare into the flames. We will have to try and remember what happened during our last story time. After all, it has been some weeks since we had followed our party, so it'd be understandable if much of our memory has gone the way of a flame deprived of air, leaving only smoke and ash. During our last session, the party had arrived in the capital of the nation of Tverfia, the capital called Otton. They had arrived and helped the Tverfian mercenaries to sneak their way into the city so that they might disappear and find their way back to the front line. While in the city, the party set about finding rooms, seeking out work, doing what a group of adventurers may on arriving in a new city, having just completed a job. During this time, Rasmussen would awaken from a long nightmare, from the memories of his home, from the influence of his ancestors, and joining with the rest of the party, they would find themselves relaxed in a tavern as jobs were brought to them, and one would be selected. It seemed some weeks ago a nearby village had sent a request for help with banditry or raiders in the outlands. Unfortunately for them, though, the ongoing war between Tverfia and the Athrone territory to the north had rendered most mercenaries and soldiers far too busy to reply to the needs of civil peasantry. And not only that, but adventurers have been in short supply in the city, as jobs had become rare, and any job posted had a high chance of being heavily influenced by the nobility to help one faction or another within Tverfia. So the party accepted this job, though there was always a chance that the raiders were long gone and so no pay would be had. With the job accepted, though, the party would find themselves drawn out to the streets as excitement rushed through the city. There was to be a hanging, and the party would be caught up in the crowd and witness the excitement, the intoxication of the citizens of Otton as deserters were placed upon the noose. The gallows would be well filled with over 5 traitors to Tverfia. And as the man leading the procession would end his speech, every citizen would scream out for death. The only voice yelling in opposition would be Valandria's, calling for mercy, rejecting an execution. And while her voice would bring shame to those around her, it would not sway the crowd as a whole. And as the last noble deemed death to be a worthy punishment, the traitors to Tverfia would be hung in that city square to rancorous applause from the crowd. With the morbid scene before them, the party would quickly make leave of the city, though only for a short time to handle their job, Valandria demanding the party leave. This sight was too much for her, too barbaric, too horrific. As the party would travel across the plains and hills around Otton, heading south and westward, Tortuga would stop them and say that he had been keeping a secret. The reason he had agreed to come to Tverfia in the first place was due to the name of the hero that the deserters had mentioned. A man named the Judge of Pelor, and his banner, a field of green with a single hill upon it, a church upon that hill, wreathed in flames. He would explain that he believes the Judge of Pelor was a member of a group of raiders that long ago attacked his home, burnt his village to the ground, and killed his family, selling him off into slavery. And the party would ask how he knew. He would say he wasn't sure, but the church on the hill was his home, and a church to Pelor. The party was nervous, as Tortuga would go on to explain that the reason he had come here was to kill the Judge of Pelor. Having heard his story, most of the party would support Tortuga, explaining they would join him if the need arose. There was some nervousness from other members, fear of how to approach such a figure of the nation, confusion about why he could be so certain that this figure had attacked his home, concern. As the party would travel onward, though, the smoke in the distance would let them know that their fears of the bandits being long gone were for naught. For as they came into the village they had arrived to try and protect, they would find it burnt, filled with corpses. Only a single survivor would be found, and then he was only saved by Pharaoh's magic, so close to the brink of death he was. He would explain for weeks they had been being watched by bandits in the woods. They had been attacked twice before, but had driven them back. For the final time, they were overrun, and everyone in the village was killed. All of their supplies stolen, and their buildings put to the torch. He would say that in the woods, a lone figure from the bandits would have remained standing. A distant figure, bearing an odd sword, glowing with a slight green light. As the party would begin searching for the tracks, the man would give one request to them. For what had happened to his village, he would beg them to kill them all. The party would find their way into the woods and eventually encounter an outpost for the bandits. A small position of palisade wall. Simple trees and logs stacked to break up and protect. A group of archers and their guardians. It seems this position was meant to warn the main camp wherever it might be. But it was not wholly defended, or at least not prepared for a group such as these. When the party committed to the combat, the violence was rapid and total. And Upvakni would reveal himself being allied with these bandits, who would engage in a duel with Tortuga, who would begin to hold his own. But just as the fight seemed to be, perhaps, on the brink of completion, the rest of the party would spring on the man, flinging spells, arrows, and a summoned dagger, spilling the man's blood quickly, bring up Tortuga to try and chase down the few bandits escaping to warn the main camp. Valandria would reveal a very interesting amount of magic, arriving behind the wall and casting a jet of flame down it, instantly roasting and killing 3 of the bandits, while the rest of the party waded through the arrow storm to pick off those that remained. One bandit would escape into the woods to warn the camp, but one would also be captured alive and questioned. Over the course of their questioning, the party would learn that these bandits were actually not from near here, coming from much further east than this. However, their previous leader had been killed by a figure with a strange sword that had plunged it through his back and ignited him in green flames. The man that the bandit simply called Sethic had then guided the bandit group here to Taverfia and begun raiding all the villages within easy distance of their current encampment. As the party pushed a little harder, the bandit would finally reveal that the real gold and jewelry that they had found, more than simple peasant supplies, was buried beneath the tent of the other surviving Upvakni within the camp. With this, the party would allow that bandit to go, sending him off into the woods and watching him disappear. They would rest for a time to catch their breaths and to prepare for the next push. Traveling quietly through the woods, eventually they would arrive at an area where the trees had been cleared around a circular camp. Walls erected, spikes dug in front of the gate. Bandits filling the structure. The man claiming to be the leader of the bandits would step forward as the party would walk their way into the clearing and ask the party to simply walk away. Go home. They were leaving today after all, and they could claim whatever reward they sought for getting rid of the bandits, since they would be leaving. But thinking of the burnt-down village, of the violence that had been committed, of the horrible acts these bandits had done, the party refused and charged across the clearing towards the fortified bandit position. The fight would be bloody and dangerous. The entire party would have to cross the open field as archers peppered them from a distance. But the quick-moving Tortuga and Valandria would arrive at the gate in mere seconds and begin engaging with the bandits there. Stepping from the back of the camp would be three armored figures, one holding aloft a blade. Along its flat grew long green crystals. The two beside him, wearing plate mail as well, each armed with a halberd, would charge into the combat, engaging with Tortuga and Valandria. The fight would go on, and as Tortuga would believe he would finally be striking the killing blow on this vicious Sethic, one of his guardians would dive in front of him, taking the lethal strike, sparing their leader for one more round. And in that time, Tortuga would be driven near to the brink of death before Valandria would grab a hold of him and teleport the pair of them out of danger. With that, Perch would rotate to the front and begin swinging his maul wildly, slaying one bandit, then the next, before arriving at Sethic. Perch's hammer would be raised high and swing with full force, as Sethic's blade would be driven into the ground. Dark words muttered as he rose his hand, energy gathering for some sort of spell, which did not come, as Perch's hammer struck into the helmet of the man. The sound of glass shattering could be heard as the crystals along his blade would turn to dust and fall to the ground, shortly followed by Sethic. Helmet indented, skull fractured, he would lay slain. What few bandits remained at this time would surrender, the one keeping them going slain. The rest of the party would make their way into the camp. The only person still on their feet, still seeking a fight, was the second bodyguard to the Sethic. Plate mailed, halberd drawn. The party would in short order knock the man unconscious and bring him over to the surrendering bandits, tying them up and placing them aside. As the party deep breath took a moment to look about and realize they had won. With that, I believe we are caught up, or at least somewhat reminded of what happened during our last session. With that, we know where the party shall begin, in the encampment of the bandits. Many of them bound off to one side, the guardian of this Sethic there. Many questions still remaining. What spells was that man meant to cast? Why had he driven this group of bandits here? What is the strange crystals that were growing on his sword? Perhaps they would ask his guardian once they had a moment. Perhaps not. But they did still have loot to find here. And with that, we can take a moment and relax, as we will begin the story proper, in short order. How restricted is D&D in events like the hanging? Would there be a specific combinations of race and class that would absolutely not allow the hanging and interfere, or does that depend heavily on the player? In a world like yours, which is quite big and lore-rich, there's also other friendly adventuring groups which are controlled by NPCs. Do you remember what the spell would have been if Perch wouldn't have killed him? Well, I guess we can definitely take this line by line. How restricted is D&D in events like hanging? Would there be a specific combination of race and class that would absolutely not allow a hanging and interfere, or does that depend heavily on the player? There are two things that depends very heavily on. The first is the DM and the world they have created. While within the exact rules of Dungeons and Dragons, there is nothing that would make like any race or class 100% always and in all positions against hangings. Characters who are good, particularly chaotic or neutral good, might be in general opposed to the idea of hanging. But that's more of an alignment choice, which is entirely within the player's control. Paladins who in older editions had a need to maintain their alignment for their powers, or clerics who their god might be interested or disinterested in certain actions, might be a mechanical reason for affecting a player's choice. But at the end of the day, that's more something that's decided by the DM defining to the players what kind of world they're in, defining to the players what their god wants within the moment, or something else to that matter. Outside of overarching, like, cultural or world reasons for making a decision, though, it would lie entirely with the player, essentially. In a world like yours, which is quite big and lore-rich, are there other friendly adventuring groups which are controlled by NPC? 100%. In my world, there are a lot of people that move around as adventurers, as mercenaries, wizards for hire, things like that. A lot of them work through basically a group that's called the Guild Hall, which was originally a group started within the Elven nations. And not all nations actually allow the Guild Hall, because there's a belief that Aethan uses it to keep tabs on other kingdoms in a kind of diplomatic way. So certain places that are on bad terms with the elves might not allow them. But there'd still be people moving around monster hunting and the like, though they might not consider themselves adventurers and more think of themselves as mercenaries, hunters, or poachers. Something more in that line. And finally, do you remember what spell would have been if Perch would not have killed him? I do, in fact. It was a very important spell for Sethic to establish a certain idea behind the power that the Sethic had. What he was casting was a form of the Summon Demon spell, Summon Lesser Demon, I believe. He was attempting to summon a Hellhound to assist him in combat. However, the spell was interrupted by Perch's attack, and so no additional enemies were summoned at the time. Though it would have been very exciting after that fight to see the party try to deal with the Hellhound. They were able to spare themselves from a magical creature suddenly emerging and being entirely hostile to everyone there. Well, does that answer everything you had, Martial? If everybody's still feeling relaxed into the story, we can definitely begin very soon. I'll just give you all another minute if there's anything else you need to get, like a drink or a snack, or if there are any other questions out there. You're welcome, Martial. Anytime. I think you know I do love talking about my lore, my world, and Dungeons and Dragons in general. But, if there's nothing else, then I believe it is time for us to rejoin the party in the bandit camp. As the party drags the unconscious Sethic guard to join those who had surrendered, they bind him with rope. Rasmussen, drawing out his 50 feet, begins moving down the line of the captured bandits. He has experience binding people into a chain gang, and so quickly sets about it, making sure none of them will be escaping or be able to make threat to the party again. While all this is happening, Tortuga limps his way back into the camp, draped partially over Valandria's shoulder, having just been teleported out of harm's way. The two return into the camp and look around at all of the slain enemies. Tortuga collapsing to the ground in a heap, telling the party, just need a minute to catch my breath. Pharaoh quickly running over to provide some first aid to her injured ally. With that, Perch crouches down to the dead Sethic figure and begins to look over the plate mail the person seemed to be wearing. It was of a strange design, not one Perch or, as Valandria and Malachite joined him kneeling, any of them recognized at all. It was made of a very dark metal. It seemed to be perhaps iron or steel, but held black veins through it, similar to a Damascus make. Most interestingly, the helmet seemed to not be one meant to go over top of the head, or rather one that was not placed on the top. Built more like a mask, it would be slotted over the face and then wrapped around the head over top, as there were two long slits in the armor that, as they now looked closer, gave room for the man's horns to peer out overhead. Pulling the mask-like helmet from Sethic, they find beneath a tiefling with dark gray skin, similar to the color of stone, but where were wrinkles, the corner of his eyes, the lips in his mouth, was a dark greenish color, a very strange palette for a tiefling. Looking at the next guardian, they see this too was a tiefling, pulling the helmet from their head. This one appeared to be more human in color, a bit of a grayish tint to their skin, but still predominantly on the peach side of things. As Valandria Malachite examined the guardian, though, Perch would kneel down to the strange blade and begin picking it up, watching as dark green sand blew from it. In Perch's hand was a large great sword, a Damascus steel blade from hilt to tip. As he brushed his hand over it, the last of the strange crystal-like sand blew from it, and the blade appeared unmarred, save for a small, singular, crystal-like growth on its hilt, near the flat of the blade. Perch would rise up, grab the sheath of the weapon, and attach it to his back. As he does so, Malachite would look over. "Hey, are you just taking that?" "Well, I killed him, so I figured his blade would be mine." There is a momentary argument from Tortuga, still face first in the ground, talking about how he had been the one fighting the man the most of the time. Technically, anything that he had should belong to him. Perch would turn around and ask if Tortuga really wanted the great sword. Tortuga would raise his head, look up, shake it, and go back to his momentary nap. As Perch would place the blade away, Valandria approaching and saying, "Well, we do believe it to be magic, yes? So perhaps I should take a look at it, see if there's anything special about it." "Later," Perch says, cold and brusque. Brushing her off, he quickly begins moving around to other tents. "Oh, what are you doing the looting then?" Rasmussen says. "Somebody watch these. I want to go check out what some of these tents got in them." With that, the party begins dispersing about the camp, going through the tents and looking for valuables. Some abandoned equipment and weapons are found. Rasmussen quickly grabbing a crate of crossbow bolts, pulling out a large quarrel of them and placing them in his own bag. Searching through the place, they would eventually find the stacked up supplies of all the surrounding villages in the area. A massive stack of crates, bags, and barrels. Flour, vegetables, fruits, ale, water, honey. All the basic essentials that any villager might want. And stacked up with so much, the party realized they would not be able to carry it all. Not even half of it. Rasmussen began making quick work, trying to peel through to find the most valuable of the resources, and placing them into several crates, each of which one of the party members should be able to carry. With that, Valandria began seeking out one particular tent, glancing her head through each, looking for the signs of a tent belonging to the Upvakni. Eventually she would find it, a rather Spartan tent, just a few cots, but the recognizable furs and runic stones of their homeland. Valandria would step back and remove the tent. Beneath it would be recently tilled soil, obviously dug up and reburied multiple times. "Does anyone have a shovel or something? I think we need to dig here." With that, Malachite would approach her, smiling wide. "I love to dig," Malachite says, immediately falling to her knees and digging into the soft soil with her hands. I do not think that is quite necessary, Malachite." Just let her go. She likes to dig." Rasmussen states, going back to sorting out the goods. This seems so impractical. Valandria waves her hand, summoning an invisible servant, and having him join Malachite in the digging process. 15 or so minutes would pass of Malachite happily digging through the dirt, before a small chest would be found. The party would work together to pull it up and to open the chest, revealing it full of gold pieces and abandoned jewelry. Nothing particularly fine, but definitely the finest that any villager might possess. With that, Tortuga would rise from his resting position and join the party in dividing up the loot. As the gold would be divided around, the party would set to picking up the crates that Rasmussen had prepared and begin walking from the camp, stopping at the gate where the surrendered bandits were bound up and where the bodyguard of Sethek sat on the ground, staring at them. This was the final member of the trio that the party removed the armor from, and unlike the other two that were tieflings, they found the man beneath this armor was human. He stared daggers at them as they pulled the helmet from his head, his eyes constantly flitting back to the dead tiefling on the ground. Valandria would kneel down, look the man in the eyes, and ask, "So, why were you here? Where were you and your friends from, and why were you attacking peasants like this?" The human would look her in the eyes and smirk. "I can make him talk," Tortuga says, approaching, cracking his knuckles. As he does, the human gives a strange barking laugh as he looks up at Tortuga. He slowly opens his mouth to reveal the stump where his tongue had once been. Scarred, it seems to have long ago been removed from this man. "Damn it. That's barbaric," Valandria says, rising up, as the man slowly closes his mouth. "Were the tieflings treated like that as well?" Looking over the other two, they'd find the two tieflings still possessed their tongues in full condition. That it was just this man who had been freed of his speech. "Who did this to you?" Valandria knelt down asking. "And why?" As she asked, the man would slowly raise his hand, revealing a tattoo across the back. A 12-sided shape, black. Simple decagon, dodecagon, with a line cut through it. Valandria would stare at it a moment before she would remember something from her time in the cities of light. I think they're from Barenverden," she says to the party. "Where's that?" "Far to the south of the cities of light. They were the ones who did the Dark Crusades, the marches of Barenverden against the world. They're from a desert tundra. There are, I think, 12 or 13 clans, and the symbol of their nation is that shape, shaded in like it is to mark out the clans." "So, what are a bunch of Barenverden people and a tongueless man doing here?" "I don't know. Melandria says, staring back at the Guardian. Well, we've got everything we came for. Bandits are managed. So, what should we do with this lot? Do we just, execute them here? I think we got that right? Oh, we did promise that villager that we'd kill them all. At this, the bound bandits begin becoming restless, starting to realize what's being discussed. No, I will not kill people in cold blood. We're not going to just cut them down like animals. What? You want us to let them go then? Let them go do, whatever they like? Run off into the woods, disappear, become bandits somewhere else? No, that is not what I'm saying, but we can't just kill them without a second thought. Alright, well, what are you suggesting? I say we bring them back to Otton. Let them be, properly dealt with by the law. Fine. Might work as good proof that we took care of them as well. Alright, you heard her lots. Stand up and get moving. We've got to take you back home so you can be hung. With that, Rasmussen quickly works to get the bandits up and moving. The rest of the party falling in step, each of them carrying a heavy crate filled with supplies. Today has been a very profitable day. With that, the party begins making their way through the woods, back towards the village that had guided them here. Back towards the thin, wispy gray smoke on the horizon of the place that had been put to the sword, then burned. After an hour of travel, the party would arrive at the outskirts of the village, and looking across it, on the side of a distant hill, they would see a lone figure digging. The survivor of the village was on its outskirts, a shovel in hand, standing alongside a row of 6 graves. At the foot of the hill, he had dragged the corpses of his friends, his family, his neighbors, some 24 figures. He was not even close to halfway done. Looking at the men digging desperately, Tortuga would stop for a moment and stare at him. Stare at this burnt, desolated village. Looking back at the party members, the supplies in hand. You all go on ahead. I think I'm going to spend the night out here. Are you sure, Tortuga? We can all stay if you... No, take them back to the town. Make sure they get put into prison and all that. Let them know what happened here. I want to go talk to that man, Tortuga says, a moment of sadness crossing his eyes. Alright, Tortuga, don't take too long, Rasmussen says, adjusting the crate on his shoulder, the supplies these bandits had taken. We'll be in town. We'll see you in the morning then, yeah? Alright, Tortuga says. With that, the party get the bandits moving again, down the road and away from the village. As Tortuga crosses through the desolation and arrives at the foot of the hill, seeing the corpses lined up in a row. He begins making a slow climb up the side of the hill to the place where the survivor was digging the graves. As Tortuga got closer, he saw the blood dripping down the shovel's length, the open wounds and blisters across the man's hands, the desperate exhaustion in his eyes, the sweat soaking through every inch of his clothing. Tortuga would stop and stare, just for a moment, at this desperate figure who had lost everything in violence and ash. We killed their leader, Tortuga said. We found them and killed most of them. Those that surrendered are getting taken back to Otton to be hanged. The quiet voice would force the man to stop digging for a moment. The shovel would fall from his exhausted fingers as blood weeped down their tips and fell to the ground. Turning and facing Tortuga, they would meet eyes for a moment, as Tortuga would say, "I'm sorry this happened to you. Let me help." With that, Tortuga would place the crate of supplies down on the ground, march towards the man and take up the shovel, and begin digging. They had many graves to do, and even with a full night's work, it was unlikely they would get through them all. Down the road, hours had passed as the party begins to see the city of Otton in the distance. As soon as its walls can be seen, the bandits draw the chain gang to a halt, refusing to move onwards. "Oh, now you're concerned," Rasmussen says, as the bandits begin falling to their knees, begging for their lives, begging to not be taken to the city. After all, they'll be executed. "Well, it's exactly what you deserve, isn't it? You going around, killing people, taking what's theirs, and now that you're faced with a bit of punishment, you fall down and weep on the ground." Landria looks through them all, one by one. "Is this really what you want, then?" Looking down the line, only one figure remains standing. The Sethic guard, the tongueless man, who stands resolute, unflinching. He seems ready to keep moving, as the rest of the bandits keep begging. Pharaoh then approaches, slowly drawing a dagger from her belt. She leans down to the man at the front of the gang and whispers softly in his ear, revealing the blade to him. "Well, if you do not wish to face the noose, do not wish to march to the city, don't worry. I will offer you comfort here, a swift end, if that's what you want." Her hand goes to the man's jaw, her talon tracing down his cheek, as she whispers her dark comfort, the blade moving closer. The man's begging would stop as he sees into Pharaoh's eyes a coldness, a darkness, a willingness to deliver her mercy. The man rises to his feet, afraid. Each bandit in order seeing the offer placed before them, the execution at the hands of this strange Aarakocra, or walking to the city and hoping for clemency. The choice is obvious now. as they slowly rise up one at a time and continue their march to Otton. Arriving at the outskirts, the party would hand over control of the bandits to the first guard they meet, saying that this was a group that had been attacking villages to the south here, a job they had officially taken up with the guild hall. The guards are thankful and summon up a sergeant of the military to come deal with this issue. As they do, Rasmussen offers to wait with the bandits, telling the party to go on ahead to the guild hall and receive their payment for this job. He'll make sure everybody gets put into prison and that their names are properly reported to whatever sergeant or military leader comes to see them. The party nods and follows Valandria's lead, heading through the city to the guild hall to receive payment for this job. Rasmussen sits and waits with the bandits, only for a few minutes, as a Tverfian military official approaches.
And what is this? Bandits! Cut 'em up, they're messing with your peasantry. Been robbing all the people around them. Better we bring 'em here, get 'em properly tried, and proof of what we've been doing round here.
Well, thank you very much, Sir Dwarf. Rasmussen, please.
Of course, Rasmussen. Thank you for your service to Tverfia.
Of course. There's just one little thing. We brought some of the supplies with us that they'd been stealing, as you can see here.
With that, Rasmussen places his crate on the ground.
And I was hoping to, get a proper thanks for this and for everything we had to leave at their camp.
With that, the sergeant would turn, side-eyeing Rasmussen for a moment.
It seems a shame to just leave all those supplies out there unattended. After all, anyone could come by and get them and make sure they don't get to the proper people, right?
Of course. It seems like that is something that the military should seize control of quickly to make sure it all goes back to the proper places.
Right,
Rasmussen says.
I don't know if I can quite remember where it was, though. There was a lot of marching, dealing with all these men.
Of course. Perhaps a proper thank you can help you with remembering.
With that, the sergeant would hand to Rasmussen a pouch filled with gold coins.
Right you are. Well, I think I can properly remember some directions for you.
With that, Rasmussen drew up a map explaining where the bandits' camp was and how many supplies should still be there, trading it off to the sergeant along with all the bandits in tow for some extra payment.
I will be sure to send some men to gather it very quickly. Thank you, Rasmussen, for your service to Tverfia.
And thank you, sir, for your help.
With that, Rasmussen would take his coin and seek out the rest of the party at their tavern, dropping his bag on the table as the party shows the pay that they had received from the guild hall for the job completed. All in all, it's a very good haul. Though as Valandria asks Rasmussen where his coin came from, he explains he had sold the supplies to the military. A moment of irritation crosses her face. I don't know how I feel about selling that off to them.
What do you mean? Who's going there anyway? Peasants gather it up. It's just part of the taxing and all that.
Yes, but what about all the villages that now don't have those supplies? Shouldn't those go back to them?
I didn't see us stopping to give over any of our stuff to that man.
It was the last survivor of his village, Rasmussen says, tipping his drink and drinking pleasantly with a heavy coin pouch at his hip. Landria falls quiet for a moment, irritation obvious across her brow, wondering at the morals of what had been done. It is midnight as Tortuga collapses to the ground in exhaustion, placing the well-worn shovel beside him. He hears the survivor standing, crossing over to him. How about we both just take a breather for a moment, Tortuga says. We've been at it for a few hours now, and I think you're looking worse than I am. Tortuga cracks an attempt at a smile, though the weeping sores on his hand and the exhaustion from the 10 graves he had dug were definitely wearing on him. The man looks at Tortuga, gives a slow, exhausted nod as he lays down beside him. In silence, they stare up at the empty, clouded sky. The darkness of night and the obscuring of the steel-colored roiling clouds makes it seem like a vast void lies above them, uncaring, rolling past. Staring up at it, Tortuga gets memories of smoke and blood. Minutes pass as the pair stare up that empty sky. Silent, exhausted, haunted. My village, my home was burnt down years ago. With that single declaration, silence is broken. And though the man does not move, Tortuga can feel the attention on him now. We were attacked by strange people from the sea. They came and killed almost everyone, burnt my home to the ground, and sold me off. I remember them laughing. I remember the smoke, the blood, the pain that racked through me. I'm sorry this happened to you. Thank you, the man whispered. Thank you for helping me, helping us. I'm sorry this also happened to you. The silence stretches on for several more minutes. For this time, the survivor broke it. How did you survive that happening to you? How do you survive? Tortuga stares up at that formless cloud overhead, the darkness around them. I probably wouldn't have, Tortuga admitted. I probably would have perished or something else if I hadn't found another way. I wish I could tell you it gets easier, more bearable, but I still have nightmares of it. I still see it as clear as it was happening in front of me. The smoke never cleared. The blood is still there. Tortuga's hands subconsciously grip at his wrists, at the bindings and bandages he keeps his hands permanently wrapped in. Instead, you just have to find something else to drive you forward. What drove you? The man asks. When things were darkest for me, I found a place, a monastery. They helped me. They gave me food and a place to rest, but more than that, they worked hard to try and get me to see more than that day, more than the blood, the smoke, more than vengeance. Did they help you? Not as much as they hoped, Tortuga said, looking down at the staff at the foot of the hill. I was not a great student, but it helped me to a degree. They kept telling me that vengeance would only lead to more and more growing violence. I couldn't fully let it go, but I've begun to wonder if they were right. What will you do after this? Tortuga says, this being the first time he has looked at the man lying beside him. The man remains staring up at the sky, lost in the darkness. I don't know. I guess leave. I can't be here any longer. Once everyone is buried, I have to leave, but I don't know where to go. The man then turns towards Tortuga. What should I do? Tortuga stares at the man for a moment, before staring up at the darkness over him. I don't know if I can really help you, friend, Tortuga says. Like I've said, though they worked hard to help me, I don't know if all of it really stuck. But if you're able, he turns towards the man. Maybe you should find that monastery as well. I think they might be able to help you, at least as much as they helped me. The man nods slowly, staring up at that roiling grey overhead. I might just do that, friend. But before that, I don't know if I'm ready to let all this go. I'm so tired, so lost, but also so angry. He turns towards Tortuga. I heard the rumor of a group nearby that has worked hard to start killing off any bandits they come across. I thought I might try to find them, but if they aren't what I've heard they are, maybe I will go find this monastery you speak of. Peace. Peace does sound very nice. Tortuga nods, though the man doesn't look at him, as his own eyes return to the sky again, wondering, how nice would peace be? His eyes dart to his feet, to the bottom of the hill, where he sees his black staff sat. What is he leading himself to? Morning comes as Tortuga finishes helping the man to bury the last remaining members of his village. Once beneath the ground, the two give each other their thanks one last time as they depart down the road, going in different directions. Tortuga returning to Otton and his party, while this man travels south and east to seek out perhaps the way to exercise his anger, his desperation. But if he cannot find that, southwards, to find the monastery from which Tortuga came. Eventually, Tortuga would find his way back to Otton. Traveling through the streets in the early morning, he would arrive back at the tavern. Exhausted, he would sit down at a table there and wait. As the sun shone through the windows, the party would come downstairs and rejoin him, sharing about the gold and profits they would make. Tortuga, though, barely glanced at the gold from this job, wondering instead if he had been able to help that man, help him in a way that could have helped him in his own past. With that, I would like to allow us to take a quick recess from the story. I need a moment to relax my voice and to check in with how chat is doing. How is everybody? What do you think of the story so far? What of this man that Tortuga had spoken with? And what of the profiteering that Rasmussen has engaged in? Who has a darker aura at this time? Rasmussen, with the clear evidence of his slave-driving past shining through, or Pharaoh, with her dark offer of mercy? And what do you think comes next? Or rather, what always comes next when a party is in a city with fresh gold to spend? And what will they find as they look through the city for something to spend on? More importantly, how is everybody feeling? Is everyone relaxed and enjoying the story so far? Any questions, concerns, thoughts, opinions? There, Junie seems to have found my list funny. I don't think you can call it a list, Taramon. It's a story. It's a short story. It's a filthy story. It's a story with cuckoldry, fisting, and fudas. But I don't think it's a list. Spoopy this month? Hey, son, how are you doing? Glad you could join us for a portion of the story. Yeah, I got my costume on, doing a Spooktober. Ooh, I'm a succubus. I really like my stockings. I think they look fucking fly. How are you doing, son? You enjoying the story so far? Good times. Good times. Yeah. Hell yeah, son. Hell yeah. I suppose probably will need just one more minute of relaxing, but
Story time is good time. Hell yeah, Terramon. After one more minute, we will go ahead and work our way towards the end. And perhaps meet a very interesting figure by the time our story is done today. Might call off the war since we agree on this. The war? What war? What war? Terramon, what war? Oh, hydrate. Thank you, V. Thank you, Sleepy Bunny. There we go. Alright. I at least was at war with Sun. Hell yeah. I don't like chat being at war, but at the same time, if y'all got some good strategies, I do observing some nice wartime strategy. So, if you guys want to describe a battle, go right on ahead. I won't stop you. But we only have about 20 minutes left. So perhaps I should get back into the story. I don't know how to feel right now. That is fair, Marcial. That is very fair. In early morning, the party returns to the floor of the tavern, finding Tortuga waiting there for them. They would begin splitting up the profits from their job and begin discussing their plans for today. Everyone, it seems, has a bit of shopping they want to do. Rasmussen mentions he has a few pieces of equipment he's looking to sell, some things he's hoping to buy. Malachite also stating she's hoping to upgrade her weapons to a degree, showing the sickles she has been using as twin blades up to this point, stating she thinks perhaps it's time to get some real swords. Valandria shares that she's going to be looking about for a component shop. There are a few things she's going to need if she's going to be casting certain spells, especially those for identifying magical items. With that, Perch says he would like to join her. After all, he's never been to a magic shop. Would love to see what they possess. Finally, Tortuga croaks out, having not slept at all that night, his throat dry and strained, that he would like to look around a bit. There's something in town he thinks he will be finding. Pharaoh looks over at him and says, "Would you want anybody with you, Tortuga? To join you? Looking around town, that is." Tortuga glances back at Pharaoh. He had planned entirely to go alone. This wasn't something he had really been sharing, but since he had already told them why he was here, and since he was on the verge of collapsing from sleep deprivation, perhaps having someone along would be beneficial. So he simply nodded his head as the party rose from their table and split off to spend the day in town how each of them wished. Valandri and Perch would seek throughout the city for a magical component shop. It was trickier to find than they had expected, but eventually they find a place simply called Baba's Nook. Standing outside looking over it, Valandria would nod as she approached. "Wait, how do you know this is what we're looking for?" Perch says. "Look through the window. There are cricket's legs, spider webs, nutmeg, what is that? Elderberry? This is definitely a component shop, trust me. Plus, Baba's Nook. Please." Perch stares up at everything. To him, this seems like just a strange store. Something filled with odd knickknacks. But he slowly shrugs as he makes his way behind Valandria. In the store, they meet with an old woman Looking up from her book over the counter, they see the store is filled with shelves, books filling one area, bottles of strange liquids in another, and components for every spell under the sun. In jars, tins, crates, littered about, filling the room with a strange herbal muskiness.
Ah, hello, my dears, and welcome to Papa's Note. What could I be helping you to find? I am looking for a pearl. I think you know what for, so don't try to show me anything of incorrect value, please. Do not upsell me, do not downsell me. I need a pearl for casting Identify. Of course, my dear. I have just what you are looking for.
With that, the old woman would draw up a strange jewelry box and begin showing off the many different pearls in her collection, one of which bearing a strange black dot, giving the pearl the appearance of an eye, claiming this would be the most useful for any sort of spell for trying to see the truth of something. The woman begins trying to upsell Valandria immediately, neither noticing, as Perch makes his way to the section of books. He begins looking through the shelves at the different titles and descriptions each of these books possess, his eyes eventually stumbling across one particular. A green book titled, in gold lettering, The Gallant Rides. Picking it up and looking it over, the book seems to be a collection of stories of a knight gallant from Boscadelia, riding around all of Athrone, fighting monsters, engaging in chivalric deeds. Perch decides to keep this book, holding it in one hand. His eyes eventually stumble across another book, a dark gray, nearly black book, titled in sheer black, making the words almost impossible to read. Though on closer inspection, the title can be made out. Seeking the Veiled Emperor. The strange, enigmatic book holds that Perch for a moment. He decides to take this one as well, placing it with his other book. He begins crossing towards the front of the store, where Valandria has finished explaining to the old woman that she doesn't need anything else, just a basic pearl will do, paying the woman and buying a few other basic components. The woman seems a bit upset having not been able to peel just a few more gold coins from the clever witch. She then turns to Perch as he slowly places the two books down on the counter. "Just these, please," he says. "Well, of course, my dear. That will be just a few copper pieces. If you are ever in need of any other books, please do come by." "Of course," Perch says, picking up the books he had now purchased, placing into his bag, and joining Valandria as they depart from that strange, strange store. Across town, Tortuga stands outside of a large building, a vaulted ceiling with a sun placed above the doorway. A church stands before him, a church to the god Pelor. Pharaoh stands beside him, staring up at the church. "So, are we going in, Tortuga?" Yeah, he says quietly, crossing through the threshold into the church. They enter into a quiet room, candles lit and incense burning. Pews line their way up to an altar. Two different clerically dressed figures move around, managing the incense and the candles, while about a dozen different people sit in the pews, offering up muttered or silent prayers to the stained glass sun behind the altar. The pair move in quietly, awkwardly. Pharaoh, having never been in a church to a god she was not familiar with, unsure what the customs and proper behaviors would be here. Tortuga, taken aback by everything he sees. "Hello?" says a voice to their right. Looking down the pew, they see a woman smiling at them, patting the seat behind her. "You can sit here if you would like." Tortuga stares, his mouth opening and closing as words fail to come. "Well, thank you, my dear," Pharaoh says, grabbing Tortuga by the shoulder and pulling him into the pew to sit down. "This is a very lovely church you have." "Oh, thank you. It is not like mine, of course, but I do love coming here." "Really?" Pharaoh continues. "Oh, yes. It's a great opportunity to be thankful for Pello for everything he has given us. Like that great warrior to the north," Pharaoh states. "Yes, the Judge of Pello is definitely the reason I have come here. You can imagine people have been very excited ever since the war has been turning around." "So, the judge asks people to worship Pello?" Tortuga states. "Well, I mean, he does not really ask, I suppose. I simply give my thanks for bringing a champion to save Taverfia."
And he's a champion of Pelor.
"Of course. What else would he be?"
So he gives prayers and the like?
"Well, I've never met him," the woman says, Tortuga realizing the forwardness of his questions.
Sorry,
he states, looking down. "If you would like, I could go find the priest of the church, and he might be able to answer any questions you have." "Oh, that would be lovely, my dear," Val states. "Please do. We would love to learn more." With that, the woman smiles and exits the pew, walking away. In silence, the two sit, Pharaoh glancing over at Tortuga, hoping to give her a better sense of what he's after. But he simply stares at the stained glass window, the figure of the sun, the idea of a powerful Pelor. The priest begins making his way towards their pew and gives the two a smile and a deep bow.
"Welcome to our church, to Pelor here. Are you two seeking guidance or blessings from the great Lord of the Sun?"
"Oh, perhaps, though I believe we have more questions about this church, about the worship. I am not from Taverfia, so I'm not very familiar," Pharaoh says, giving the man a pleasing smile. "Could you tell us a bit about this church?"
"Of course. This church was not always to Pelor. The goddess of fertility and harvest was always more popular in Taverfia than Pelor was. But in recent times, worship of Pelor has grown to such a degree that we have been able to afford to buy this church and raise it in his name, to allow more people to come and hear sermon and receive blessings from the Lord of the Sun." "That is very interesting," Pharaoh states. "I imagine you are all very thankful to the judge, yes?" To a degree,"
the priest says, clear awkwardness in his voice.
he has most certainly caused many people to seek out Pelor again, though we prefer not to
make everything about him, obviously. He is a champion, and so is to be praised, but Pelor is from where the blessings come. I see. So has the judge not been to a church like this? I suppose I don't really know. I am not aware that he's ever left the front line of the war, actually. Really? That is interesting. We were, well, just wondering if there was ever a way to meet him. Through a sermon or something of the like. I am afraid not that I know of. Our church does occasionally take donations and send them to the front, but the judge himself is not been to Otton, to my knowledge. Thank you, Tortuga says, rising from the pew. Your church is beautiful. Very quickly turns on his heels and begins exiting from the building. Pharaoh stands and offers some quick apologies to the priest, crossing to the church, following Tortuga. They make their way out onto the streets. The Tortuga bends and begins breathing deeply, fighting back hyperventilation. Well, I suppose that was helpful enough, yes? Tortuga slows his breathing, straightens up, and says, Yeah. It seems he's always at the front lines, and I guess he hasn't made the connection to the Church of Pelor himself. Others are doing that. Tortuga's eyes scan the streets around him before they rest on a banner hung from a window nearby. A green field, a hill, a church wreathed in flame. 1 second, Tortuga says, as he walks down the street towards this building. Looking up at the window, he makes a quick jump from one wall to the next, climbing up and grabbing the ledge of the window. Wrapping his fingers around the banner, he yanks, hearing a slight tear in material as he pulls the banner down, landing on the street below. Pharaoh rushing over. What are you doing? What if somebody sees you? Tortuga looks up, raises his hand, and casts a minor illusion spell, creating the illusion of a banner hung from a window. Sorry, I think I need this, he says, tucking the banner away. With the newly stolen banner in his pack, Tortuga and Pharaoh begin making their way down the streets, eventually meeting up with Perch and Valandria. They begin to go in search for Rasmussen and Malachite. Wandering through the streets, they eventually find the pair at a blacksmith's. Rasmussen, hand on his forehead, clear irritation and upset painted across him, as Malachite is standing beside the blacksmith in a heated argument. Apparently, she had been insulting his craftsmanship, insulting his low offer of magical equipment, wondering where she could find something that is actually worth any amount of gold. The blacksmith arguing back that this strange child is hassling him, and that if she's not satisfied, she can go off and find somewhere else to shop. To which Malachite counters back she would if he would just give her directions to an actual source of magical items in the store. The party would begin rushing over and start diffusing the argument to the best of their abilities, Valandria and Pharaoh offering their apologies, as Tortuga tries to distract Malachite from keeping the argument going. Eventually, things would be diffused enough that Malachite could be led away from the man. I am terribly sorry about her. She tends to wander off and to look for arguments. Yes, I'd say as much. She was making fun of all of my weapons, saying that I didn't have anything of value.
I'm terribly sorry about that. Do you know what she was looking for exactly?
She kept demanding that I had better magic items to sell her. Thing is, the king has been sequestering most magically enchanted equipment for the war effort, so it's not like I could really offer more than a sword or a spear at this time.
I'm so sorry, I understand. Please accept my dearest apologies.
Right.
As she begins to turn away, the blacksmith looks at the group, sighs, and says,
Though there are some rumors of a place down in the slums. A tent, a big red tent got put up. The guy inside apparently is selling off some magic items, though I don't know what quality they are, if they'll match what your friend's looking for.
Valandria turns and smiles. Well, I do enjoy rumors. That the party is able to collect a vague sense of where this strange tent might be. Recounting what has happened, Rasmussen gives a deep sigh, grabs Tortuga by the arm, and starts guiding him back to the tavern.
Listen, I've been on a bit of a babysitting duty all day, and I'd like a bit of a break if I don't mind. So I'm going to be taking Tortuga back to the tavern so he can stash his stolen goods away, and I don't have to deal with the guards for the rest of the evening. You all go on your hunt for this strange man. If you happen to find the store, come and find us so we could all do a bit of proper shopping, yeah?
With that, Rasmussen and Tortuga leave for the tavern, allowing the rest of the party to head off into the slums of the city. It is an hour of travel, as the directions they were given were vague at best, and the party ends up turned around more than a few times in the maze-like slums of Otton. They find themselves turning corners, finding dead ends, places rotten fish sit in the gutters where people beg at every step. Till eventually, Perch turns his head as they cross between two different butcheries. One selling seafood, the other not listing where its cut of meat came from. Between the two, Perch halts as he sees something strange. It takes the remainder of the party a moment to realize that Perch is not moving. As they turn and peer down the narrow alleyway he seems to be so fascinated with, as they see a red tent stretched between the narrow alleyway. A maroon color, really. It sits so strangely here. Obviously something meant to be set up in a wide open space. It seems almost hung from either end of the alley, encompassing the entire space, like the tent was alive and trying to devour the buildings that hemmed it in. Well, this seems to be the place, huh? Valandria says, as she begins to stride into the alleyway towards the softly glowing tent. Opening the flap, they step inside. As the flap closes behind them, suddenly they are accosted by the sound of a whipping wind across a tundra. Looking around them, the outside of the tent hints at a terrain that they did not occupy. The tent seems to give them more space than would have been possible in the alleyway, but the air inside is muggy and warm, like a stove lit for too long to drive back the Arctic cold that surrounds them. The clattering of thick sand thrown by the wind into the side of the tent can be heard at all moments, like they had been dropped into the middle of a desert, wrapped by Arctic breeze. Looking about, the low-lit tent is filled with tables and shelves, all covered with strange assortments of items. On one table sits a trio of daggers, one seemingly made of obsidian, one with a strange greenish Damascus feel to it, another seemingly crafted of ivory or bone. On a shelf sits a pair of boots, a cloak, a lantern, and a strange amulet. And across the tent, at the back, is a slightly raised platform with a wooden chair close to a throne placed on top. Sat in that chair, wrapped in thick furs, is a singular figure, a maroon-colored tiefling, his hands stroking across his chin, bound tightly in his thick furred coat. He looks down at those who had entered as he slowly rises from his seat, his hands going wide as every lantern in the tent begins to glow just a little more brightly, illuminating everything, bringing focus back to him. Welcome, welcome. My name is Silla Darrera Etam. How may I be of service? The tiefling says, giving a deep, illustrious bow to the party. His eyes raise, a solid red color. They stare up at the party, taken aback by this strange figure. Do you seek magical items, potions, curiosities, or cursed things? Perhaps, he says, his finger rising to a strange series of tuning forks lined on a shelf nearby. You seek my ability to identify the strange and unusual, or perhaps something else entirely. The figure slowly sits down in its throne again, reclining and looking at the four now in his tent. Please, tell Silla what it is you seek. The party stares about at the strange place with these strange items as they begin to wonder, what might they find in the possession of the man known as Silla Darrera Ertama. And with that, I believe we can draw our story for today to an end, setting ourselves up to learn what the party will try to purchase from this strange trader, and what they might have to trade to him in exchange. And for next session, I think we will have a good time learning a bit about Silla and the nation from which he comes. How is everybody feeling? Did you all enjoy story time today? I know it's been a couple of weeks since the last time we got a bit of D&D story, but I hope you all enjoyed and are excited to see what comes next. The end of story time is always sad. I know, Terramon, I know. But I hope it's also happy to have finally come for you guys to see what was happening. The story was very good. Thank you, Sour Cake. Thank you. Though, while I say thank you, also thank my party for making sure to always deliver an interesting story, if nothing else. I enjoyed it a lot. Great to have another of your story times. Hell yeah. Lol. Oh god, are you guys playing around on the Discord again? Well, I suppose that's fine. Well, then, since we're at the end of story time, we do still have a few minutes. If anybody has any questions about the story, about the universe, about the lands of Baron Verden, or anything that happened today, now is your time to ask, as I prepare myself for sending you off on a raid. As is trying to be a tradition I will be building over time. Let's see. It was depressing. Oh no. I'm sorry, you guys are having bad trades. Let's see, who is live? I don't believe Milk's still alive. No, unfortunate, or I would definitely send you guys to them. What is it? Licholette is live right now. Or Licholette, I believe is what it is. Monster Girl Artist. Someone kind of similar to Junie in many ways. So the Judge of Pelor got his title from another person. Perhaps. That is currently unknown, Martial, but he doesn't seem to actually associate with the growing Church of Pelor within Tiberphia. It seems that that is growing simply as a form of idol worship, perhaps. Excitement about basically a folk hero of some form. Something that is not being directly decided or guided by him. What if we raid Nintendo? I don't know if Nintendo would care. I think they have enough viewers, in my opinion. I don't want to give Nintendo more views. You guys know I like to send it off to people that really, really appreciate it. Oh, yeah. Well, thank you all for joining me for an exciting story time. I hope you all enjoyed. I was glad. Oh, Nintendo has less than Iron Mouse. Oh, oh dang. Is Iron Mouse live right now? Damn. They deserve less than her. Oh god. I don't actually have anything personally directly against Nintendo, but goddamn, I do like seeing a corporation get burned just a little bit. That is very fun. But I'm getting distracted. I'm glad you all had fun today. I hope to have more good story times to share with you in the future. But I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. And so I must wish you all a good night. However, since tomorrow I don't have my usual Dungeons and Dragons session, I might decide to do something a little special for you all. No promises and no hints. But keep your eyes peeled tomorrow. Early in the day, perhaps. And we might have something a little extra for you all. When would that be? I guess I don't really have a time decided. I have to come to the decision whether I want to sleep in or not. But let's say 4 or so hours before my usual time. I would say something near noon perhaps, or maybe even earlier. Maybe 10. But I know many of you are on drastically different time zones than me. So I don't know how helpful that actually is. Just earlier than I usually am. Give people in different time zones maybe a chance to join me for something a little extra. Eric, you should sleep in because I must work and I might miss it. Well, I'll definitely keep that in mind. But for now, with that little announcement out of the way, I would like to wish you all a good night and send you off to something just a little monstrous. I hope to see you all soon. Good night.